Ugh. 2020 has been quite the crazy year, right? Wildfires, pandemics, murder hornets, death barely made it halfway through the year. It's like June. And it has become clearly obvious that everyone is really starting to feel the toll of the stress and isolation that this year has brought on everybody. If you're unfamiliar, I've made a series called Cultural Cancers, calling out the extremely harmful effects that different social media platforms have on the mental and emotional state of the average person. And I use the term series loosely because it's only 2 other videos. I try to pinpoint these things so that you can be more aware of them and take a better approach. This year has brought with it the worst state I think social media has ever been in. Ever. We've seen the damage that social media can do. We've known about it for a long time. John Ronson did a great TED Talk, I suggest that you watch it, on how one tweet can ruin someone's life. Not insensitive or hateful tweets, just ones that are worded poorly. That was in 2015. 5 years later, 2020, and it has become evident that we did not heed John's warning. I have a script all written out for a video that I thought about making regarding the importance of semantics, how you word things and how you communicate things. It's so important, how we do this, especially in a society where everything is so easily misconstrued. We jump to conclusions, we assume the worst, we take things out of context, and we attack one another for not taking the right side of an argument that is, frankly, communicated poorly. I still think that it's a very important topic, but I didn't end up making that video. In part because I know that the different examples and illustrations that I plan to use would themselves be misconstrued and potentially taken out of context. The people who might find this video most helpful, the people who I made this video for, are by nature probably unlikely to even benefit from it. How do we address the state of the internet world as it is right now? Well, lately in looking online, I think that it's become clear that the problem doesn't lie in misunderstandings, but rather in how we respond to them. Not in effective semantics, but in anger, defensiveness, retaliation, shaming everything we see as immoral, witch hunts, or as we call it today, cancel culture. I don't even remember the first time I heard that term, but I think it might have actually been this year, which is fitting, I suppose. It is essentially when people online, primarily Twitter, try to rally support for a cause of some kind. That cause being the cancellation of someone. It's a fitting term because in this movement you cancel their opportunity to have a career or to be seen as a model citizen. We cancel their success. We weaponize digital angry mobs to cancel their mental stability via harassment, get them arrested, end their social life, and rarely their actual lives. Yes, people have died because of internet outrage. A good example, after the explosion at a marathon in Boston, such angry mobs mistakenly targeted someone that they thought was responsible. He wasn't, and stress of the harassment and threats that he was receiving led him to take his own life. This too was more than 5 years ago. We've learned nothing. It's only gotten worse. A few days ago, Jenna Marbles, who is, a bigger YouTuber, at least for now, she quit YouTube. She did so because there were things she said and did, like 8 years ago, that captured the attention of these angry mobs of the internet. She gave a heartfelt apology for things that she herself said no one was even asking her to apologize for. In her words, "I came here to have a good time, and I'm not having a good time." Whether or not you think that she was in the wrong in those videos, the things she did 8 years ago don't reflect who she is today. The same goes for anything anyone says or does 8 years ago. The things I did 8 years ago might affect me, but they don't represent me. I'm a different person. You are a different person. Critical summed up a lot of people's feelings well when he said that it felt like I was watching a hostage being held at gunpoint. You need the internet's permission to be friends with people. Kevin Leiber of Vsauce said, "Social media has become a phenomenal tool for persecution, but virtually useless for exoneration. This isn't just about content creators or influencers, though. This has spread all over the place. During the protests here in the US, I saw a video shared of a man recording some police officers destroying their own car. And I was shocked, because it seemed like clear proof that police were staging violence to make protesters look bad. And the internet mob piled on, screaming, yelling, shaming, sharing. It was only later that I found out that this video does not depict police destroying their own car. It depicts them removing the shattered windshield so that they can drive it. Shattered because of rioters. Just a disclaimer, I'm not making any political statements about the situation here in the States. I've actually attended one peaceful protest, if that tells you anything about where I stand. Later on, we had a situation known as the DC blackout. A protest went on through the night and into the morning in Washington, DC. Some people reportedly were suddenly unable to access their phones or the internet at like 1 a.m. This is the supposed social media blackout that happened. And I myself couldn't find any comments from anyone after 5 a.m. my time. And I found it like increasingly strange. You know, no one's posting anything. What happened to these people? Something seemed awry. People were saying that they hadn't heard from the protesters who were there. Silence all of a sudden. Early that morning, dozens and hundreds of accounts were either hacked or created to post the same copy-pasted message. But it was something to the effect of, "Everything is fine here in DC, just another fake news hoax." And when you see this same message, word for word, posted hundreds of times, you get the impression, the distinct impression, that everything is not fine. Something happened. Well, it turns out there were people who came back from the protest. Nothing unusual happened. No blackout even actually happened. They really were fine. As for these bots, it was what's known as a foreign panic campaign. Hackers and botters worked to inspire panic in people by using the oldest trick in the book, that being reverse psychology, to make them believe that something was most definitely going wrong by spamming "everything's fine." What this tells us is that we are not the only ones weaponizing our growing online mob mentality. Other governments are now literally weaponizing our own anger and fear against us. Smarter Every Day has a great video called "The Future of War," where he interviews military representatives and explains that guns and bombs are no longer the only way in which a war is waged in the world today.
And now there are these other domains out there, cyber, space.
It's waged with social media, hacking, panic campaigns. Smart, dangerous people have recognized that we are terribly volatile when it comes to our online presence. As we scream at those around us to stop being sheep, we have become precisely the predictable, easily manipulated targets that these militaristic groups desire. So not only does our violent online emotionalism harm others, but it also makes ourselves vulnerable to manipulation. We have become prone to a sort of vigilante justice that punishes opinions and specific word usage as harshly as actual crimes. We have paradoxically learned to abuse and weaponize our own freedom of speech in order to police that of others. We do this because we think that it's the most effective way to deal with who we perceive to be hateful, bigoted people, by being hateful to them. Fight fire with fire. And too often, they're not hateful people. They're just not. They're normal people being misconstrued. But what about when they are? Is this a good way to fight hateful people? No. This does not fix bigoted mindsets. It doesn't remove ignorant opinions. It teaches people not to talk about them. You aren't changing anyone's mind. You are teaching them that you are their enemy. They might admit defeat, escape the onslaught of the internet, and censor themselves to avoid another attack, but they still hold on to their anger and every thought that they had prior. Or worse, they don't admit defeat. Instead, they double down because you've made it clear that you are their enemy. So they fight the enemy. They fight back because they think that they are the hero of their own story, a martyr for their beliefs. And these beliefs don't happen on their own. Others may rally behind them, form groups, create echo chambers. And by sending forth a mob to hate them so passionately, you have now reinforced their own beliefs. Fortunately, the right response to the world that we've created is not an easy one. We must be willing to address our own internalized anger and bitterness, a bitterness that has contagiously spread through our entire online culture and given birth to more and more of itself. We have to learn to build self-confidence enough that we don't take the words of strangers so personally. We have to hold on to our certainties with loose hands. We have to learn to be quicker to listen and slower to respond. Never assume guilt until you have personally seen the proof, and vice versa. Never assume total innocence until you have personally seen the evidence that is stacked against them. If you have neither, don't assume anything. You don't know, and that's okay. It's okay not to know. Speak kindly. And when you must criticize, do so constructively, not to tear people down. I love freedom of speech, but the tongue is a two-edged sword. Be careful and cautious with how you wield it.